Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we are going to look at Margaret Fuller,
Oh, wow. Margaret Fuller.
a really important figure in 19th century America. We're talking, feminist, journalist, literary critic.
Many things.
But what we are going to focus on in this deep dive is her as a philosopher.
Right. Not just a biography, but her actual idea.
Exactly. Exactly. And how she actually, tried to live by those ideas. Her book that we're looking at, Woman in the 19th Century, which came out in
A
1845.
classic.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah.
It expanded on an earlier article that she wrote called The Great Lawsuit, Man versus Men, Woman versus Women.
Oh, yeah. That's a great title.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting title, for sure. So, we're looking at, like, what did it look like for Margaret Fuller to act as a philosopher?
Right. To live it.
To live it in her time.
Mm.
What did that look like? And how did her thinking, ultimately shape her life and the world around her?
Absolutely. So where should we start with this?
Well, I think we have to start at the very beginning.
Okay.
And that is her upbringing, particularly her education.
Her father, Timothy Fuller.
Yeah, Timothy Fuller, her father, played like a huge role in
Mhm.
in really shaping her intellectual development early on. He gave her a really rigorous classical education that you just wouldn't normally, give to a young girl at that time.
Right. That was for the boys.
Exactly, yeah. But she was reading by the time she was 3.5, and she was immersed in, you know, Latin prose and poetry, composition, Greek writings from Homer to the
Even in
philosophers,
the New Testament.
even the New Testament,
Yeah.
right? As well as science and social sciences.
Right. Natural
Yeah,
philosophy.
yeah. Just a really, really intense education.
Yeah. From the get-go. Really intense.
Yeah. And then at 9, they added even more to the mix. The Spectator, Paradise Lost by Milton.
And Dr. Samuel Johnson.
Come on.
This is heavy stuff.
Really heavy stuff. So clearly that kind of early exposure must have had an impact. How do you see it shaping her?
Well, it definitely shaped her into this incredible intellect. I mean, she was known for her, just her brilliance.
Yeah.
But it also, it came with some baggage.
Yeah.
Her father's, really demanding nature contributed to her struggles with obsessiveness and self-criticism. She was always striving for more.
Right.
It was never enough.
Yeah, yeah.
That pressure to achieve intellectually stayed with her.
Right. So it's interesting. There's this sort of like tension, almost like this like trade-off, this amazing foundation, but also this like, pressure cooker. How do you see that playing out in her life later on?
Yeah. Well, that's something we can definitely explore further. It's interesting, though, that while she devoured both Roman and Greek texts, her preference shifted towards the Greeks.
Yeah, why is that? What was it about the Greeks that she found so appealing?
Well, she contrasted them with the Romans, and she saw the Greeks as representing, like, idealism, imagination, this freedom,
Yeah.
And the Romans, she felt, were more about practicality, logic, this more kind of stern,
Oh, right. I see.
stern composure, right? And this love for imagination also ties into her fascination with the European Romantic movement, which was all about the power of emotion and individual experience.
So it was this Greek emphasis on the ideal that really kind of resonated with her own, developing mind and maybe even sort of fed into her own personal philosophies later on. By her 30s, this is amazing. By her 30s, she was considered the most well-read person in New England. That's saying something.
Really is, yeah. And it wasn't just about reading a lot. She synthesized it all, bringing together all these different influences.
That's really interesting about her, right? It's not just like she knew all these facts, it's how she combined them into this like dual philosophy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So if you look at her intellectual development, you see her trying to balance these seemingly opposite forces. She saw the classical, like Plato,
Right.
as focusing on what she called masculine qualities, like reason, structure.
Yeah.
But then Romanticism celebrated feminine aspects like
Yeah.
intuition, feeling.
Right, right.
And her belief, her radical belief, was that everyone, no matter the gender, needed to cultivate both these sides within themselves.
So she was really ahead of her time in many ways. Challenging the norms of the day.
Definitely.
Now, Another big influence on her was Unitarianism, right? I mean, this was the faith she was raised in, and it seems like this idea of self-cultivation was like super important to her and really to a lot of middle-class Americans at the time.
Absolutely. This whole notion of working on yourself,
Yeah.
improving your character, your intellect,
Yeah.
it was a big deal back then. And William Ellery Channing, he was like the rock star of Unitarianism.
Sure.
He was a huge advocate for Christian humanism. And Fuller saw him as this heroic figure. He embodied self-culture. And what's important, and I think forward thinking for that time, is that Channing believed this self-improvement wasn't just for the elite. It was for everyone. Men, women, different races, everyone.
That's pretty revolutionary for that era. Now, for our listeners who might not be as familiar with Unitarianism, what were the core beliefs that fostered this idea of self-cultivation?
Okay, so Unitarianism, it came about as a kind of rebellion against the stricter Calvinist beliefs of the Puritans.
Hmm.
They were all about reason and individual conscience. The main difference, as the name suggests, was that they didn't believe in the Trinity, that whole God in three persons idea.
Right.
Instead, they emphasized the inherent good in everyone, the divine potential we all have within us.
Okay.
And they believed you should strive to become more Christ-like through your own efforts.
So it was really this focus on personal growth and this idea that everyone has the potential to become better, to become more like Christ.
Right. And Channing, he expressed this beautifully in his sermon called Likeness to God, where he talks about how we come to know God by cultivating our own divine potential.
Wow. So it was this very individualistic approach to spirituality, but also very focused on self-improvement, on becoming the best version of yourself.
Exactly.
Now, Fuller, she did eventually move away from, the formal structure of the church, but it seems like Channing's influence really stayed with her. I mean, it kind of fueled her own quest for self-realization and even her burgeoning feminism.
Oh, absolutely. Around June 1840, she wrote her A Credo, which was her own personal statement of belief. And you can see Channing's influence in it. That emphasis on personal growth is right there. But it wasn't just religious thinkers that influenced her.
Right.
The intellectual scene was buzzing with all sorts of ideas.
Right. I mean, there were the Scottish moral philosophers, right? People like Reid, Kames, Stewart.
Oh, yeah, they were huge. Their idea of faculty psychology, which basically said that human nature was like a system, it had a hierarchy, and reason was at the top, guiding the emotions.
Ah, okay. So reason is like the charioteer.
Exactly. And the emotions are like the horses. You got to keep those horses under control. And for them, conscience was a rational faculty, and progress came through the disciplined use of reason.
Interesting. So you're constantly working on yourself, on your reason, on controlling your emotions to become a better person, a better thinker.
Yeah, Fuller was all about that. And she was lucky enough to have access to Harvard's library, which was a big deal for a woman back then. It allowed her to really dig into all these philosophical works firsthand.
Wow, she was really fortunate to have that kind of access. Now let's jump ahead a bit to 1835. That was a really pivotal year for her.
Losing her father and meeting Emerson all in the same year.
Right. Big changes, huge changes. Her father died, and she met Ralph Waldo Emerson, who became a really important friend and mentor to her.
A turning point.
Definitely a turning point. Now, their personalities were like completely different.
Yeah.
Emerson was known for being like really cool, cerebral, even ironic.
Right.
And Fuller was much more passionate, outspoken. Some might even say noisy, but in a good way, like sincere. So it's interesting how that dynamic played out. But Emerson was really key in introducing her to his own philosophy of spiritual self-transcendence.
Right. And that's where Transcendentalism really took hold for her. It shifted her focus towards a more intuitive, spiritual understanding of the self and the world.
Right. So can you give us a little Transcendentalism 101? What was it all about?
Sure. Transcendentalism, it was this intellectual and spiritual movement, and they were reacting against what they saw as this dry, overly rational and materialistic American thought at the time.
Okay, so they wanted something more.
Yeah, they wanted a direct connection to the divine. They believed in the goodness of people and nature, and they wanted to go beyond just our senses, beyond just logic. They wanted to find those deeper truths.
So it's about trusting your intuition, going beyond the surface level.
Right. And they were influenced by European Romanticism, which was huge in Europe at the time. And Kant, he was a big influence too.
And they were also really into Plato. Right?
Oh, yeah. Plato was like their rock star.
Like another Channing.
Exactly. With his ideas about ideal forms and a higher realm of reality.
Right. I mean, Plato wasn't just some historical figure for them. He was like a guide, a key to understanding their own philosophies.
Yeah, he was a blueprint. And they were also super into Neoplatonism, which built on Plato's ideas.
Yeah.
And then there were the Cambridge Platonists from the 17th century
Oh, right.
who focused on the role of reason in faith and individual insight. And then there's Plotinus with his system for achieving union with the divine through self-cultivation.
Okay, so all these thinkers emphasize this connection between, like, your inner world, your spiritual growth, and your understanding of the world around you.
Right. And for Fuller, her engagement with Plato was super nuanced. I mean, she recognized that he had some pretty progressive ideas about women.
Oh yeah, like in the Republic, right, where he talks about female guardians having the same education and opportunities as men.
Yeah, that was revolutionary for his time. But then, she also noticed that in other writings, he seemed to be okay with, even justify, the subjugation of women.
Right. So she wasn't just blindly following him, she was picking and choosing what resonated with her, what didn't, and using that to build her own philosophy.
Exactly.
Now, it's interesting, metaphysically, I mean, when it came to, like, the nature of reality, it seems like she had a slightly different view than, say, Emerson and some of the other transcendentalists.
You're right. Channing and the Unitarians, they were dualists. They believed in a separation between mind and matter, with the spiritual realm being the most important. Emerson and many others were more idealistic, saying that reality was fundamentally mental or spiritual.
Okay, so there's this difference between, like, the mind being separate from matter and the mind being the ultimate reality.
Right. But Fuller, interestingly, she stuck with a more dualistic view, probably because of her Unitarian background.
So she was, like, drawing on both these traditions, taking what she found useful and leaving the rest.
Yeah. But she did embrace the transcendentalist distinction between understanding and reason.
Right, which seems to be, like, at the heart of their whole framework.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
for the transcendentalists, understanding was your everyday thinking, your perception, logic, how you get through the day. But reason, that was something higher, something intuitive, divinely inspired. It gave you access to those deeper truths.
Okay, so it's not just about, like, knowing facts or being able to reason logically. It's about this, like, deeper understanding that comes from intuition, from inspiration.
Right. And it was through reason that they sought to reach that Platonic ideal. And you see this in figures like Channing and Emerson, who wanted to be these modern-day spiritual and intellectual leaders. But what Fuller did, and this is groundbreaking, is that she said, hey, women can have reason too. They can be these leaders too.
That is radical. So she's taking this Enlightenment idea of equality and combining it with this romantic emphasis on individual experience. He's really pushing boundaries. And this leads us to her conversations, right? The ones she held for women in Boston.
Yes. A really cool way to put her beliefs into practice.
Yeah, it sounds like such a, like, innovative and practical way to really act as a philosopher.
Totally. So from 1839 to 1844, she organized these weekly sessions just for women, 2 hours every week. The women paid a fee to attend. These weren't just like casual get-togethers. These were serious intellectual engagements.
Wow.
So she would start each session with a presentation on a topic. Then she'd lead a discussion, encouraging the women to really think critically, to go deep into these ideas. And the women who attended, they were well-read, many connected to Unitarianism or Transcendentalism. They were hungry for something more than what society offered them intellectually.
So it was a way to provide them with the kind of intellectual education and exchange that they just wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Exactly. At that time, women's education was often seen as more of a, social thing, like it was to make them more marriageable or whatever.
Right.
But Fuller wanted to use these topics, like literature and the arts, to get them thinking about bigger questions about their lives, their roles, their potential. She was inspired by Plato's dialogues and Bronson Alcott's teaching methods. It was all about sparking their own thoughts.
And these conversations, they had a ripple effect, right? I mean, some really prominent women were in attendance.
Oh, yeah. Lydia Maria Child, Elizabeth Peabody, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Julia Ward Howe. I mean, the list goes on. It was like a who's who of future reformers and thinkers.
So it wasn't just about talking in a room. These discussions were planting the seeds for social change down the line. Now, it's interesting, Fuller, she was initially a bit hesitant to broaden the scope of these conversations beyond just, like, women's issues.
Yeah. She wanted to keep the focus on women's intellectual and personal development, even though some participants were involved in other things like abolitionism. But Harriet Martineau, the British feminist,
Yeah.
she criticized Fuller for being too narrow.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it seems like as Fuller led these conversations, She started to realize how interconnected these social injustices really were.
Right.
You can't just focus on one thing in isolation.
Right. And that shift in her thinking led to the Great Lawsuit, that really important article she published in the Dial.
Exactly. The Great Lawsuit was a huge leap forward. It shows a much wider understanding of social justice. And even though it has lawsuit in the title, it wasn't a legal argument at all. It was about these transcendent ideals of manhood and womanhood.
Okay.
And she said that both encompass the full range of human qualities, masculine and feminine.
So not just like women are this, men are that.
Right. It's more fluid. And her point was that men, because they had more opportunities, had realized their manhood more fully than women had been allowed to realize their womanhood.
And this was a huge problem for her, right? This inequality.
Absolutely. And she said it needed fixing, not just for women, but for everyone.
And she didn't shy away from calling out the hypocrisy she saw in American democracy, particularly in how marginalized groups were treated.
Oh, yeah. She talked about the injustices faced by Native Americans, by enslaved people. She saw a clear connection between their fight for basic rights and the fight for women's equality.
Right.
It was all about the denial of opportunity, a betrayal of America's supposed ideals. And it's interesting, her own father, Timothy Fuller, he was pretty progressive for his time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he opposed the Missouri Compromise, which would have expanded slavery, and he supported Native American rights.
So those values were kind of in her blood.
Yeah, in a way. Now, The Great Lawsuit eventually became her most famous book, Woman in the 19th Century.
Right, a landmark book.
It seems like it took those earlier ideas and just went much deeper, much broader.
Definitely. The core argument is still there.
Yeah.
Women's self-development, equal opportunity. But now she's tackling a wider range of social and political issues. She talks about Irish independence, the idea of a Jewish return to Palestine.
Really?
Yeah. And she was against the annexation of Texas because of what it meant for the spread of slavery.
Wow. So she was really connecting these different struggles, showing how they were all part of this bigger fight for justice and equality.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, while she argued so passionately for women's rights, she didn't explicitly call for women's suffrage in the book.
Yeah, that is interesting considering how central suffrage became to the feminist movement later on.
It might seem strange to us now, but back then the demand for suffrage wasn't quite as central. But her arguments for women's intellectual and personal autonomy, they really laid the groundwork for it. She focused on challenging those deep-seated cultural norms, advocating for wider opportunities for women in every aspect of life. Remember the sea captain example?
Oh, right. She said women should be free to be sea captains if they wanted to.
Exactly. And later suffragists like Susan B. Anthony, they definitely saw Fuller as a major influence.
She was paving the way.
Yeah. And she also had this really forward-thinking vision for marriage.
Yeah. What was her take on that?
Well, she didn't see it as, this ownership thing or one person being subservient to the other.
Right.
It was about partnership, a true alliance between equals, where both people support each other's growth, work towards shared goals. She called it a pilgrimage toward a common shrine, which is just beautiful.
So marriage as a journey of growth and discovery together.
Exactly. And ultimately, the book is this powerful call for women to reach their full potential and, by doing so, vindicate the rights of all women.
And it's worth mentioning that her writing style wasn't always the easiest to follow.
That's true. Some people found it a bit rambling, full of these obscure references.
Right, maybe lost on some modern readers.
Yeah. But even with those quirks, its impact as the big feminist text of its time is undeniable. I mean, it sparked these crucial conversations about women's roles and rights in a way that few other works had done before. And it paved the way for later feminist thinkers,
Right.
like Simone de Beauvoir, for example.
Right. So Fuller, she really set the stage for so much that came after her. And, after making a name for herself as a leading intellectual, she moved to New York and became America's first full-time literary critic. I mean, that's another way she acted as a philosopher, right? Engaging with these big ideas on a public platform.
Absolutely. In 1844, she got this amazing opportunity to write for the New York Tribune.
Which was a really influential paper at the time.
Huge. And the editor, Horace Greeley, he was a Whig. Not exactly known for being radical, but he was a big supporter of Fuller's work.
Huh, interesting. Why was that?
Well, partly because of his wife. She had been to Fuller's conversations and loved them. But Greeley also respected Fuller's intellect. And the Tribune gave her this massive platform, reaching thousands of readers all over the country. She could really shape public opinion on all sorts of things.
Right. I mean, she had a voice and she wasn't afraid to use it.
Exactly.
Now, it's interesting to think about her own political background. I mean, you mentioned her father, Timothy Fuller. He was pretty progressive.
Yeah, definitely. And Margaret, she aligned herself with the Whig Party, even though, women couldn't vote back then.
Right.
But she saw them as being more open to reform, especially when it came to women's rights. And they were connected to movements like abolitionism, temperance, educational reform. So her political leanings, they really stem from her philosophical commitment to justice and equality.
Right. It was all connected. Now, then she became a foreign correspondent in Europe, which must have been an amazing experience for her. I mean, seeing these different societies, these different political systems firsthand, how do you think that shaped her?
It was transformative, for sure. Starting in 1846, she immersed herself in European life, sending back these insightful reports to the Tribune, and she met some incredible people.
Yeah, like, whoa, who did she meet?
In England, she met up with Harriet Martineau again. They had made up after their earlier disagreement. And she had these intense conversations with Thomas Carlyle, the Scottish philosopher, although they disagreed on a lot, especially when it came to things like democracy and race.
So they challenged each other intellectually.
Definitely. But she really admired Giuseppe Mazzini, the Italian revolutionary. They shared this belief in democracy, self-improvement through education.
Ah.
Really inspiring figures for her. And then, of course, there's France, where she met George Sand.
The famous writer, yeah.
Yeah, who was really challenging gender norms. And Adam Mickiewicz, the Polish poet and revolutionary. They connected on this shared passion for social democracy and romantic ideals.
So she was really engaging with all these different thinkers, all these different movements, and kind of refining her own ideas through these encounters.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gets to Italy, and that's where her philosophical beliefs really turn into political action.
Right. Her involvement in the Italian revolutionary struggle, that's like the ultimate example of her acting as a philosopher. She wasn't just thinking about these ideas, she was putting them into practice.
Totally. She threw herself into the movement for Italian unification and a republic in Rome.
Mm.
She was a huge supporter of Mazzini. At first, she had some hope for Pope Pius IX,
Yeah.
Maybe he could be a reformer.
Right.
But she quickly realized he wasn't on their side, and she denounced him publicly.
Wow. So she wasn't afraid to speak truth to power.
Not at all. And her own radicalism grew during this time. She even embraced socialist ideas that went further than Mazzini. And of course, it's in Italy that she meets Giovanni Angelo Ossola, and they fight together in the defense of the Roman Republic. It's incredible. Her commitment to justice and freedom, it led her to actively participate in a violent struggle. It's a testament to the depth of her convictions.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable how she lived her philosophy. And it's just a tragedy that her life was cut short, in that shipwreck on her way back to the US. And the loss of her manuscript on the Roman Republic, it's heartbreaking.
It is a huge loss.
But even though her life ended tragically, I mean, her vision of a world where everyone has the freedom, the equality, the opportunity to be themselves, to reach their full potential, regardless of gender, race, class. I mean, it's still so powerful, so relevant.
It is.
And her life itself, it's a testament to this deep connection between what you believe and how you live your life.
Right. Her life answers the question, what does it mean to act as a philosopher? It's not just about having ideas. It's about taking action, using your intellect, your passions, your values to create a better world.
Yeah. And I think that's really the key takeaway for our listeners. It's this question of how are you acting on your beliefs?
What are you actually doing?
What are you doing to make a difference? What aspects of Fuller's approach, I mean, her intellectual curiosity, her commitment to justice, her willingness to speak out, what resonates with you, and how can you be more like her in your own life? It's a challenge she leaves for us.
A challenge worth considering.